I'd like to call the Pump Storage Advisory Committee meeting to order. We should take a moment of reflection. Moving on, is there any disclosure of interests? Okay, then we'll move on. Public participation. I'll just read this as number 4 on the agenda. Members of the public are encouraged to provide the committee with their comments and questions. Presentations must be pre-arranged with Kirsten Higginson, project administrator, pump storage project, before the agenda is released. Members of the public who wish to make a deputation about specific agenda items at the meeting must register in advance with Kirsten by 4 p.m. on the day prior to the meeting. Presentations are limited to 10 minutes and deputations are limited to 5 minutes. I don't believe there are any presentations or questions today. We have them. I hope everyone has reviewed the minutes of the last meeting. Are there any comments or questions on it? Can I get a motion of approval of the minutes? Adam, and second by Bob. Bill. Items of consideration for today, we're going to be talking through the areas of interest discussion. If you'd like, Kirsten, if it makes sense, then I'll just talk through what we're planning for this meeting and then you fix whatever I've said wrong. So what we are trying to do with this meeting is bring forward the impacts, the benefits, and the opportunities related to the project. Very important in this, there's no wrong answers and no questions that are offside in this. We need to be thoughtful about thoughtful and trying to compartmentalize things. Are they in the benefit or the challenge or just questions that we want to get answered? And try to group that so that in our next meeting, we can have a thoughtful, organized discussion about them. This was going to be facilitated by Becky Smith of Ainley. Turns out could not make it today. So I am going to substitute poorly for her efforts, but I will work to try to facilitate the best I can, recognizing I learned of my facilitation role about 20 minutes ago. So we'll just carry on from there. As we dive into it, and Kirsten will, I think, drive this, but important to think of the project as a whole, remembering our terms of reference, the values and the principles of the municipality. Important to nail down specifics in the questions so that we don't have a specific question, but we've asked it in a general term and we don't get the information that we're looking for. And then there's some examples that we may dive into later. So hopefully everyone's talked to their network and has come loaded with a bunch of questions and ideas that we can talk through over the next couple hours. So with that, I will hand it to Kirsten.
So we've come up with these 5 broad categories, just kind of categorize everything in the discussion. So we'll start off with the economy, but as Doug said, we'll run this in the same format as our other municipal advisory committees. So that's through the chair. And again, anything that you think would be of interest to learn about, or is a potential impact or benefit, please feel free to bring it forward, as it'll help guide our learning plan going forward, and agenda setting. And I think it's important as well is that this isn't the only time that we'll be able to bring forward these types of concerns or benefits. It will be kind of on an ongoing basis. So if we come up with something down the road, we can always add on to our kind of agendas and learning plans as we go. So this is to kind of get an overall themes and importance of themes from the committee as we go forward. Questions? We'll start off with the economy. So the purpose of it to identify economic areas of interest from the project. And I will leave it to the floor and back to the chair.
All right. Does anyone have any areas of interest related to the economic activity that the project would bring? Is there items or information that we want to get related to the economic impacts and benefits of the project? Adam.
I think to properly understand the economics, first we need to figure out how many people are going to be here. An economic view of 50 people staying in Meaford for this project versus 500 or 1,000 or 1,500 is going to change what that discussion is going to be. So I think we can come up with some broad strokes, but getting a solid number on what that is, I think is going to keep us from wasting a bunch of time figuring out an economic plan for something that's not going to be a reality. So as far as I was able to gather, I spoke with TCE and their highest numbers of workers at any given time was estimated at around 1,700. Now they didn't figure all of those were going to be within our community, but that is what their height of their workforce was planned to now be. So the highest number I had ever heard before was around 800, but with a discussion with Mr. Shields from TCE, their latest numbers are more closer to 1,700. So I think that's something we need to consider when we're figuring out economics is how many bodies are going to be here spending those dollars. I mean, direct economic issues. We have one grocery store in town.
Yep.
What is an extra 500 people living in this town going to do to that? You know, we have so many restaurants, so many other like all of that. So yes, there are some benefits to creating jobs, creating things like that. But unless we're going to spin up a whole bunch of new businesses, a bunch of new buildings are going to get built. You know, what is the traffic flow from just a customer point of view going to be in our community moving forward? I scheduled a coffee chat with TCE 2 weeks ago. I'm not sure how many other people have recently gone to see one, but they have some new information. They have some new pieces of what the build is going to be, screen meshes, a diagram, like a physical 3D print or 3D diagram or diorama of the whole project. So I would encourage everybody in this committee to go and have a chat with them directly. Because there does seem to be some new information that they have to give out.
Sure, I'm happy to jump in. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Just to add to Adam's comments, I think this is a great place to start because I think, you know, just building on what you're saying, the impact of that on our own businesses. And we're already facing difficulty with acquiring enough workforce for these businesses. So what is that going to look like? Where are the people going to come that are additionally going to be needed to work in the restaurants and grocery stores and so on? And I think as well, there's the potential for some subsidiary businesses to choose to be here in Meaford to support the build of the project. So if we're going to have those additional businesses, where are they going to set up? Do we have our industrial lands ready? Are we serviced? How are we prepared to attract those particular businesses? Because in conversations with TC, I believe that they will encourage those businesses to consider Meaford first before they look at Owen Sound or any areas around us. So how do we prepare ourselves to be attractive to those new businesses that will be looking to come in and support the build? So I'll leave it there for now.
Economy and business very difficult to start where we might end up. We're certainly going to have to deal with traffic somewhere along the line, and that may be better tied into the construction title. I don't know. I think there's all kinds of opportunities for pop-up businesses in the future. There again, there has to be some regulations and so on. One area that I'm sure is going to be affected is SDAs, short-time accommodations, which as of the moment, we don't have a bylaw pertaining to SDAs, and a number of people are running fairly steady businesses in that field already. And if you're looking for even 700 construction workers at a time, you're going to have. I'm sure they're going to favor accommodation as close to the site as possible. I think I would. One thing I did want to ask, Mr. Chair, when we come to economy, we're naturally thinking municipal wide, but I'm only throwing this out that perhaps the economies of some of our residents will be affected in different ways. I guess I'm thinking about the potential, maybe insurance aspects of their personal economy, even real estate values in personal situations. Now, again, that's not municipal wide, I don't think, but as a member of this committee, I think we have to try to think about everyone and everyone's situation, potential situation. So maybe we just kind of put that in as a side note on this. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
I was just wondering, have we thought at all about if we have 1,700 people coming to work, they have to stay here, obviously, potentially for a long period of time, because the construction is not going to be like a couple months. This is like multiple years. But then at one point, they have to leave once it's done, because I think the estimated number is 32 permanent jobs, somewhere around there. So that's a lot of people that are coming and then they're going in 4 years. So how do we deal with not building up too much infrastructure and then just having it all collapse when the population kind of gets cut in half, because that's a lot of people. And also I wonder, since it's so long term, the construction, is our school going to be struggling? Like if there's families coming with kids, how are we going to accommodate all those new students, especially since the school's already overflowing? We simply just don't have the room for any more. So have we, or have they considered any of those factors?
Thank you.
To build on that, we have been talking for 10 years about housing crisis and all this. So, I mean, one of the things that seems obvious is that as you build it, you're planning on the second tenant. You get construction workers in the first phase, and then you're built out your housing for permanent residents afterwards. So harmonizing those two would make sense. You build so many accommodations of a particular type that they could roll over, and would they roll over into 1,700 people's worth of dwellings, or half that or double that, depending on who's going to occupy next. So that certainly needs to be understood, because it's a great economic uplift for the community. It's like every project at home is an excuse to buy a new tool. If I can build a big enough project, I get a new saw. So if we're doing this in the right way, we manage, to pick up housing as a byproduct of the operation. So I think that's a really important thing. What I was thinking about here was local procurement, and what can we sell them? And if you've got that workforce in place, you're going to be selling them food, and that's a pretty easy local thing to envision. Are you selling them equipment? Are you selling them services? We probably, in the next chart, we'll need to start to understand what skill set's going to be required for construction. Do we have it? Is Georgian College training towards it? Is that a source? And we also consider cannibalization of existing workforce. So every single contractor needs to be helped in such a way, guided, given opportunity to retain their workforce. Because you can't be swapping one job for one job and cannibalize your existing workforce for 4 years. You devastate the local contractors. So
if I could, is another way of saying, are you concerned that wages paid on this project may take away current employees?
Yes, there would be some local inflation, perhaps.
Yeah.
There would be expectations that, that the locals can't meet. So they start losing workers. If your crew of 6 is down to 3, you're unable to do what you used to do. I'd really like to understand what the impacts are and how to mitigate it. I mean, if Georgian College starts training more of the appropriate trades, and we work cooperatively with them, maybe we're working with another college, the Fanshawe or something, but and the Canadian Trade College or Ontario Trade College. I mean, there will be a way to get ahead of this, but if you start thinking backwards on your timeframes, and you say, somebody's got to go through a 4-year program or a 2-year program, well, you got to start now to have those people available in 2 years. So we need to be backing up the timeframes to see what we need to do now, so we have the eventual positive outcome instead of a negative outcome.
I guess I have a question around if they talked with the base about using their residences, if that's in their conversation, because that would have a big impact on the housing conversation as well. So just getting answers to that, because that could be a huge piece of their workforce not building, they're not needing a house. So that would really impact that scenario. So it'd be good to know from them if that's an opportunity that they've been given or not.
Just based on my knowledge, having worked at the base for a while, you can't have civilian permanent residents on the military base. So I don't think that's a thing.
But it's not a thing to have, or whatever, like it's now not a base, it's now a commercial site with shareholders, whether it's not
I think there's certainly something to look at that I don't claim to have any understanding about, is how having a commercial enterprise on the base changes the interactions with the base. I don't have any understanding, but it's certainly something that we should at least try to understand.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There have been some early, more or less verbal discussions about a sum of funds that will come to the municipality on an annual basis. It's not taxation, it's not a PILT, but there will be an annual support of some description coming to the municipality, which will be a substantial amount of money yet to be negotiated. But I think that in itself is a positive economic development benefit to the community, is in that we will have some substantial additional funds in our coffers.
You have a sense of, and obviously it's not a commitment if it's still negotiation, of what the scale of
It
benefit would
is,
be?
and I'll look to Harley to confirm, and it is some time ago that a number was floated of $1.5 million annually. But I feel that needs to be negotiated and increased, but
Yeah.
it is some sort of a substantial number.
Thank you. That's it.
Just as an employer of 14 people, I do have a concern about losing employees, but I have to look after my people so they don't leave. The other comment I would make is the interaction I've had with TC Energy to date, they've bent over backwards to deal locally with our company rather than outsource the work being done. So,
Okay.
you know,
Good.
I'm on both sides of the coin there.
Yep. Yep.
I have a further thought, which is possibly obscure, but in my experience with the base to date, you know, they've taken on the training of police forces as an additional revenue force source. The Chamber of Commerce ran an annual general meeting about 10 years ago where the base commander was our guest speaker. And he introduced the idea for the first time to me that the base contributes about, at that time, 50 million to the local economy. From procurement, from civilian workforce off the base. There's an economic impact. At the time, we were looking at issues with the hospital, and so they actually showed up at a public meeting in support of keeping the Meaford Hospital intact. So the question I might have on this is, when we're all said and done, does the economic impact work to keep the base open? Is it one more contributing revenue that ensures that this major employer continues to be viable? And so that it's not at risk of being shut down someday because it's just not economically feasible anymore. And, you know, again, it's a bit obscure, but if the government actually just announced that they want to get to the 2% NATO commitment, then presumably the bases get reinvested in. So this project is another revenue source, keeps the base viable economically. I'd like to know eventually what that number is and just what it does to the local economy for, 50 years annually.
Has anyone heard any discussion about divestiture at the base, or is that's they're not going to take the money away to keep the base going? I'm not sure what they would do with it.
You've been around long enough, but they did once before. They closed it. Like it was a tank base for years, and it had to be shut down for close to 20 years. 20 years is the best snowmobiling you could find because nobody stopped you. But yeah, they did close the base before.
Okay. All right. Well, then, yeah, then certainly, Bob, that's something.
Harley, you'll
Yeah, I think it was down the Road.
at least. You know, it depends on the flavor of the day.
Right. Right. Okay. Well, good. Then, yeah, certainly we should investigate that. I just want to come back to Adam's comment about the employee count going to 1,700. I'm concerned that my basic understanding of the project is wrong by 50%. Do you have any more information you can share about what drove the increase in the number of people?
They weren't hugely clear on what that was. I mean, they were pointing at more the new concept of burying everything, so it's turning more from a traditional construction project into more of a mining project, is what they kind of likened it to, because they're going to be doing a lot of drilling, they're going to be doing a lot of subterranean work, they're going to be doing a lot of that sort of stuff. So whether that is what's driving the increase in workforce, or whether they're trying to shorten their construction window by adding additional workers, they can work half the crew under the, like underground, half the crew can keep going up top, not sure. But that was kind of what they alluded to, was because of this new design and it moving towards more of a mining structure than a traditional construction project. When I asked that question, that was the answer that I got.
Yes, Shirley?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And it's just occurring to me, I think we also have to remember these are going to be good paying jobs. These are not going to be people looking for affordable housing necessarily. These are going to be people with dollars in their pocket. And I know it's been said, but you know, potentially they're going to want to shop and eat in our local restaurants. And they're also going to be looking for things to do. So that has an impact maybe on Meaford Hall and on our community centers and on all of the functions that exist here. So, you know, those things are all kind of built to accommodate the number of people we have here now. And what does it look like if we've got a few hundred more people even coming to Canada Day or Summerfest upcoming? And you know, just are we ready for, you know, those additional folks coming into our community? And I think we need to take a long, serious look at what their needs may be. If they're coming into town and they've got money to spend, what do they want to spend it on? And how do we evaluate that? And how do we make sure that it's our businesses who benefit and that they're not driving to Wind Sound or Collingwood for shopping and entertainment? So I think we really need to do some work to understand what it is they'll be looking for and how it is that we can meet those needs so that we can keep that money right here in our own community.
Yeah, certainly. I think the other part with 1,700 now employees is typically younger men, and that brings its own bunch of challenges that we'll need to fully investigate and understand the impact of. Changes the amount of policing, for instance, that we probably need.
Mr. Chair, just to jump in a little bit more on that, I think we'll also have to recognize the need for, you know, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and recognizing these folks may be coming from all over the world, and you know, just what are their expectations. And there's a wonderful service at Grey County called GB Lip that welcomes newcomers and works with, you know, immigrants and so on coming into our community. So we'll need to be prepared to link up with them, I think, because some people may be coming with language barriers or who knows what. So how do we, you know, help them feel welcome in the community?
Years ago, when we first heard, or 5 or 6 years ago now, when we first heard about the TC project, I had an image in my mind of, oh God, this is going to be another gold rush situation. And I hope this committee can come up with some ideas as to how we prevent that. I mean, yes, we want the workers. Yes, we want the monies, but we don't want to be overwhelmed. That's interesting. Back in 1942, Bob mentioned policing. Back in 1942 and 1943, the Meaford police force was inundated by people enjoying themselves after hours. The entire police budget was spent in something like 5 or 6 months during that. Chief Ford had to actually call on the military police to come and help keep order in the town and in the area. Now, I'm not saying there's a possibility of that again, but you bring in, you know, a number of people, and they're working hard through the day or maybe through the night or whenever, but when they're off, they're, you know, they're gonna want to kick up their heels a bit. So I think it's, I'm hoping there isn't a problem, but I think that's something to keep in the back of our minds, that that's one little part of history I don't want to repeat.
scale and the scope and the trickle effect of the current costs, because I don't think they've really revisited since COVID, not that I'm aware of. If they could provide that so we can understand where the town might impact and what areas and just the scope and the dollar values of the build.
Yep, absolutely.
Doug,
Bob?
just a question. These are monumental issues that we're talking about here. On a practical scale of things, a community that has gone through a similar experience, and I'm thinking the Bruce Nuclear would be one, where you've had a large construction project move in that basically outpaid any existing business, hands down, still does at that point in time, and draws the workforce of a lot of family in Hanover. At 5 o'clock in the morning, the Tim Horton line is down the street. They're all going to Bruce. So that's how far they reach, right? Hanover's an hour and change. So the impact of this, let's say of 1,700 guys, half of them live outside of town. They never come here. They just commute from wherever they live. Because a lot of the skills and constructional people in Toronto, there's 1,000 people. And even if half of them want to stay, you've got 500 at that point in time. So, you know, they're going to be here. They're going to be competing for the work, the places to live. How many houses has Meaford built in the last 4 years? Could you accommodate even 25% of 1,700? Could we accommodate 400 houses in the next 4 years? Could we get them built? Do we have the infrastructure for them? They're pretty monumental things. I'm wondering if reaching out to someone like, at communities that are beside Bruce over there, and to see if they have any suggestions. Now, I can't do that as a layman, but possibly the council could, because they've gone through this for the last, 50 years, and now they're going through it again. So because with these new reactors, the thing. So I would think that they might have an idea that would maybe help us, because these are huge numbers. And to accomplish it, it's my understanding with TC Energy, if they get the green light, it's been going on for a long time. They got a lot of money invested. They're going to want to pull the trigger, and that's going to happen right away. And to build the amount of housing that's available, has it ever been discussed that what they might do is just put up a camp, like they do in most of their construction projects across Canada? They'll bring in a camp. There's people that do that for a living. The trailers, they'll set up beats on the base because the community can't handle it. It's that simple. So I'm just thinking this is a suggestion that it's possible that we possibly talk to some other community that might have experienced very similar thing that we're talking about here. A huge construction job that requires a tremendous amount of people, tremendous amount of resources. There's one way into Meaford and one way out. Going to put several hundred, I would think, tractor trailers on the road minimum, hauling aggregate up there and back and forth. And how's that going to affect the community? This might be construction, but there's 1,700 workers, Adam, 3 shifts, at that point in time. So this could be a 24/7. It wouldn't be unusual, that situation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just to Bob's points, if I may, I think we'll need an understanding from TC Energy. My assumption is that there won't be 1,700 workers if that's the number here all at once. So what is that breakdown? Is it, how many hundred at any given time, so that we can get our heads around what that means and how we need to prepare for that? Because should they get the green light, then there's the, environmental impact process, and that will bring people into town. I mean, we're talking mostly now about construction, but I think we also need to think about those years prior to construction and what are the economic impacts of that particular period of time, and what are the needs of those people coming in to undertake those processes, and just what does that look like. But again, I think we need to get some scale from them of kind of who's here when and how many, and what the expectations will be from those particular individuals.
So Shirley, would you be asking for in essence, a chart that shows the timeline of when employee, what the workforce load looks like over time, so that we can plan resources around that. That's what you're looking for.
If TZ was able to provide something of that nature, I think that would be really helpful because I hadn't heard actually the 1,700 number before
Yeah.
either. And if that, that is a bit scary, but if we have a breakdown and know that it's, 200 or 300 people here doing this and then 400 people doing something else, it's just a little less scary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bob?
So two things to add to that. One question I found helpful over the years is to look forward to some period of time. And, let's say, 1 year from now, what do I wish I had started working on 1 year earlier? And we're going to be constantly going back and forth in timeframes, but we need to have an idea of, when are the employees ramping up? What stages are coming? What's the, how do you back it up to today, to what critical decision we could make today, or what thing we should be working on so that it dovetails with the future? So I'm always asking that question, what do I wish I was working on today? And it helps me prioritize my thought process and my resources to look back on it and say, I'm glad I started when I did because I needed all that time to get it done. When I'm looking at the economic impact of this project, there's another piece to it, which is every single business owner wants confidence. They're not going to invest in an expansion or a new business or new employees without certainty. And so, this project is cloaked in uncertainty in a variety of ways. So one of the things I'm trying to keep an eye on as we go through this is, what's going to happen versus what could happen, and trying to figure out, if I'm a business owner that could get in the way of all that money and all that opportunity, when do I have to throw the switch? What's my drop dead date on any decision? And, I look at the downtown with all the empty parking lots and all the other, the contractors, and we're gonna have to dovetail with the municipality to say, those approval processes, they're slowing things up. We maybe need to streamline something or other. There's a hotel that's coming. Will it be built in time? The apartments that are coming with it, will they be built in time? Looking forward, that may solve some of these problems. Maybe there's 2 of those projects need to come underway and we eventually get the benefit of it. But you're constantly going backwards and forwards and up and down, looking at the project from all sides to figure out, what critical decisions can I make today? What processes need to be streamlined so that it runs more smoothly than if we don't.
Yeah.
So.
And I think Lindy hit on a point, an important point earlier, is that it's a fairly, in the life of the municipality, a very short window of construction. So we need to certainly have the right resources and everything available for folks, but then they go away. And what we don't want is too much housing, could be a problem as well. Seems like a stretch, but could be. Yes, Dave?
I think we kind of need to get a handle on the type of people that are going to be coming, like the permanent employees. We'll get part of them. Home Sound will probably get part of them, the same as it is right now with the current military permanent people there. We'll get a part of it. But the construction workers, I know it's, could be 4 years, but I'd be surprised if they bring families with them. It's probably going to be guys looking for a place to hang their hat for the week and go home for the weekends.
Mm-hmm.
But now TC have run big operations before. They might have an idea of what kind of workforce they'll have. There may well be some foremen that'll be there from the start of the project to the end. But I have a feeling a lot of the other workers may come and go.
Yeah. So
it makes a big difference in what type. Like a camp would work for. I'll pick cement layers, that are here for a 1 year or something like that. That doesn't work for families.
Right.
Not working out. I believe there's only 32 full-time jobs when it's done. So the impact of 32 full-time jobs after the project's done is very small. You know, a fast food place would have 30 to 40 employees and have very difficult time getting that many to come to work. So I'm thinking that in the long term, though, this is going to be a very intense short term, a whole bunch of money thrown at Meaford and a bunch of Transity guys. And not, they won't all be Transity, some will stay. But as far as long term, goals, unless there's some other industries being built, but then what are they going to support? This is a tunneling project, and massive turbines probably going to be made either in China or Japan or Germany. So I don't know what else they would support. That's the thing. So we're planning for the short term, not the long term.
I think we still need to remember, when was the last time, and you say a fast food place employs 32 people. I had questioned that. I mean, the last time that there was 32 brand new, high-paying, permanent jobs in this town, a fast food job and what they're offering up there, I think are two very different things. This is 32 jobs that might be one person in a household that's supporting an entire family on it. So, I mean, that's a bit of a difference too. Yes, there's going to be a huge short term, but I think there's still going to be long-term benefits to this as well if it does go forward. Again, 32 high-paying jobs in Meaford. I've lived here all my life. Finding 32 high-paying jobs in a single location is very few and far between. It's just the nature of it. So there will be benefits to those jobs.
Yeah, and I think we probably need to, folks have said something similar, but what those 32 jobs look like and where they are. Because there might be 32 people employed and 20 of them are operating it remotely or managing it remotely. We don't know. And so that's another piece of information we should try to understand. Yes, Bob?
That brings up another point. I'm reading with council's discussion about wastewater management and infrastructure. It'd be interesting to know, if you built a camp, what are you doing for sewage, and what are you doing for supplying water? There's elements like that need to be understood in this. It may be that's where you get a contribution towards wastewater plant expansion. So that's worth looking at as well, that it may help the municipality find the funding, because it's a trigger that takes it over the top and makes it happen. So I think that should be on the list.
Absolutely. So we get 2 hours together once a month, and we've just burned through 40 minutes in one of the 5 general areas. Now we've crossed other areas, so that I think it's okay. But just as we recognize that we want to keep moving, and I think the economy is good, and I think we've covered lots. Is there anything else that, yes, Lindy, that's top of mind on the economy?
Yes, I do have another question. It's my understanding, I don't know if this changed, that the way that this plant is going to be making money for the province and our town and everything depends very heavily on the pricing of energy and when it's expensive and when it's cheaper. So what happens if the province abandons peak pricing? Because it's done that before, and it could potentially be motivated towards abandoning peak pricing in the future. I know currently our country has a goal of, I think, 50% electric cars on the road. I don't know if that's ever going to happen, but if it does, then that means that there's a very large energy use at night when people are charging their vehicles. And then what happens if Hydro One decides, okay, peak pricing is not working in our benefit anymore, there's no point in it, so they scrap it? Does this plant become almost useless, or is there still a way that it can do good things? Like, is it going to be good long term? Because we also have to consider that this technology is very old. These plants, it's definitely been updated, but these plants have been in production since probably the 60s. And I know, of course, certain power plants are similar, but it's not like they have done amazing things in the past. So why are we using this old technology that has not brought really any true innovation when it's old, it's outdated? Why are we branding it as environmental innovation when it's really not? This is an old piece of technology. So we need to think like, is it going to be viable in the next 50 years, 25 even?
Yes, I agree. I think though that we need to try to narrow in what we're looking at in terms of, that's the IEOC's job to figure out the long-term viability of these things. I don't think we got enough to take on. But it's I think a very valid point. Yep, Bob?
I'll add this to that, which is, and I've had multiple discussions with people about this, as you know, TCE is a publicly traded company. They're driven by the need to make a profit, and they'll be punished if they do bad decision making at the top. You know, their share price would plummet in an afternoon. So they're going to try and get this right. The economics, they're going to worry about it an awful lot more than we are at long-term viability, because by the millisecond, the stock market's repricing their stock. I tend to worry more about what I can affect as opposed to that piece of whether TC thinks it's a good way to spend $5 billion. That's their job to do that. And then to mitigate, you know, bad things happening to their $5 billion. I can only imagine the discussions they're having with various regulatory bodies and trying to even entrench the peak pricing to make sure the viability of the project stays solid. But again, you know, would that be well beyond the scope of this committee? I've decided in my mind that I can't spend more space on that because that is truly their decision and they will be punished if they get it wrong. Very important.
Yes, Gina?
One last comment on that. I think it's really important that TC actually give us some good documents. I know last meeting we asked for documents, they didn't provide anything. I think it's really important that I know we've got a lot of lists to go through, that they actually give us some information. We don't want to speculate, we don't have time. We've got a lot to get through. I think it's really important that when we ask for information that they provide it. Them pushing us off is not going to help us get through this. So I think they need to understand. They need to work with us so we can be productive. And to date, that hasn't happened.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If I could just jump in. TCE will be scheduled to present to us, Kirsten will confirm, I believe, in September. We haven't invited them to speak or to, to provide answers to our questions to date. We haven't put them on an agenda yet to actually speak to us or present to us. So even though we have a representative here today, we're not inviting Mr. Little to, to participate. But in September, they will have their time on our agenda to address all of these points and to update us on the project and whatever else we request.
In the meantime, though, are they going to answer some of the questions that we have, or are we wasting time between now and then?
No, I wouldn't say we're wasting time at all. I think Adam had a really good idea on going into a coffee chat and having an opportunity for a one-on-one to ask questions. I think if it would be up to the chair, if we want information provided to us at the August meeting to come back and present a list of questions. And, we have them scheduled for September, but we could change that. We could invite them to come sooner and provide them an outline of what we wanted them to speak to, if that was the decision of the group and the chair.
I personally think that would be a better idea because we all don't want to have like 10 different coffee chats. I think it'd be good if they provided the information once, not 10 different times, 10 different stories. I think if they provided it once to everyone here would be effective.
Yeah. Yes, Adam?
I would have to respectfully disagree. I mean, I took an hour and a half of Herb Shield's time on my own to ask all of my questions. So I think it's incumbent on every one of us to go and speak to them personally to get all of our specific questions. Because as you said, we spent 40 minutes as a group, haven't gotten as far. I think every one of us should go in so that we have as much of our one-on-one time that we can get all of our questions answered.
I think it's important that I think it's good counsel that if we get the opportunity to do that and answer all of those questions, but in this forum, and I'll pause, but in this forum, I think we need to get the best general understanding amongst all of us together. And so it may be helping guide what TC Energy presents to us by asking specific questions beforehand that they're expected to answer. And I think, Ginny, you've asked a few very pointed questions.
I really feel one reason we created this committee was so we could hear, discuss, ask questions. The other thing is we're being live streamed. This is a public meeting. I think if TC is going to come and present to us, I think that's not only an excellent time for us to get better educated, but I'm hoping we get the word out there to the public that, hey, look, we've got empty seats here. Come and join us. Come and hear what's being said. So I hear what you say, Adam. We all have that opportunity to go in one-on-one, but I'm thinking this is more community oriented, and to keep with that original purpose, I'd like to involve as many people as possible. Just my thoughts, and just to follow up on what Lindy said. Good comments, good question. I'm quite sure TC has, if for some reason this project up on the base gets approved and runs for 7, 8, 10 years, and hey, look, things aren't going well, I'm quite sure TC has already thought of an alternative. You know, what can we substitute with? I mean, yeah, obviously they've been doing that because they've been huge with oil and gas for decades for no reason of theirs. That's unfortunately or unfortunately been pushed aside, and so they've thought years ago, hey, look, we got to get into hydro, we got to get into something else. So don't worry about TC. They'll have something else to come along.
I just wonder with that point, I definitely agree that they probably have backup plans on how they could use this plant in other ways if it doesn't work. But is that necessarily something that we want? Should we be thinking about the fact that maybe this is going to become something completely different eventually? Or is that's probably a way too big question for this committee, but it's just something to think about, that if this does become something else, is that something else something that we definitely don't want? Because right now we're signing up for hydroelectric, but we haven't thought, and we don't really want, I'm guessing, the alternatives, I'm assuming, but that's probably too big of a question for our committee.
Yes, I just getting back to information and taking Adam's point as well. But for instance, everything we've talked about here this evening is short of one thing, and that's information. There's potentially 1,700 jobs. That's been heard by yourself, but maybe not everybody. TC's got if they've planned this and have it budgeted and ready to go, they're going to have a pretty good idea of how this is going to go. They've had 6 or 7 years to study it, lots of time. So we would be nice right now when we're talking about housing, when we're talking about what's going to happen with our, with our existing businesses, what's going to happen with our community, to know how many of those jobs there are, like who's coming, what is the real workforce? Is it 1,000? Is it 500? Is it 1,700? That information we need to make these decisions. Otherwise, we'll talk in generalities, and we won't solve anything because we don't know the answers. How much of a community benefit is coming? Would it be enough to actually offset the cost of new infrastructure necessary to build the houses that we need? Are they going to put a base camp up there? Bob, you said, they probably already know what they're doing on these things, right? They probably have a pretty good idea. Dave mentioned that. So without that information, we're just guessing. So I think we should be adamantly allowed to, to come out with questions here that we would like answered. And I don't think we should wait till next meeting. I mean, if we bring forward questions today, because we have such a short time. We don't have a lot of time here before the impact. If this is approved on July the 31st, which is what, 2 weeks away, 2.5 weeks, they're going to get going. So, get to your point, Bob, thinking what you should have done last year is right now, right? This one. Thank you.
Request having TCE come in at the next meeting and talk to us about what the current plans are. In essence, have that coffee chat with them. I'm not sure if stuff's portable to bring it in here, or if we've got the technology to see their 3D models or whatever they've got. But I wonder if we shouldn't have that as this committee. It may be the only thing we do that day. But that's something we should look at.
I'd like to put a motion on the floor that we alter our agenda schedule and move the TCE meeting up by a month, and we can resume our impact assessment after we hear it.
So before us then is a motion that we ask TCE to come in August and do the presentation. I just want to make sure I understand, Adam, were you proposing that we stop the conversation today? No, okay.
We can continue on for as long as we have tonight.
Yeah.
And then pick it up again in September.
Help me procedurally, because I'm new to the chair. We do a vote at that?
Mr. Chair, yes, and Harley and I are not able to vote. We're non-voting members of this committee, but you can call for, any comments and then an all in favor.
Sure. Any comments about moving or asking TCE to join us in August to do a presentation?
I just had a comment. I would like the PDFs before they present, so that we can have questions after they present. We will get that in front of us. So if they could send the PDFs, the math, the financials, the project specs to us before, so when they present, we have a good understanding. We've done our homework, if you will. So when they present, we've got some good questions.
Is a week prior to the meeting adequate time, which is typically when we get the agenda, make it as part of that, if TCE will provide that information. Yep, Bob.
I like what Harley said, that you imagine, full gallery and all the people online listening in. And if we're able to deliver some version of the Thursday, intimate coffee chat to the public, that probably benefits everybody. It brings up the amount of knowledge and reduces the amount of open items. I see a lot of good come from that. And if that approach is that we are trying to bring along the public, it's, classic change management, but it also would trigger more participation, perhaps if people violently disagree with us, or they want to show support or whatever, this would be a good tool to use to trigger some of that. And it would educate the community at large. And I think that would be really helpful.
It's certainly part of what we're supposed to be doing, right? Is soliciting input and advising council. So I agree. Okay. So can I get it? So let me try to summarize what we're doing. We're going to ask TCE to join us in August and do a coffee meeting style chat with as much of the most current information as they have available, and ask that they share it with Kirsten to share with us a week prior so that we can read through it and have warmed up questions rather than reading the information cold and going from there. That makes sense. All right, I get a vote on that. That looks unanimous. Okay, motion passed. So Kirsten, if you could do that with TCE, and we'll just let them know. Okay. Yes, Adam.
I now have an environmental question.
Perfect, because I think it's time we move on to environment.
In speaking with Herb Shields, one of the biggest questions I had was when they cut things down, they are supposed to be mandated to plant them again. He was very dodgy about where those things were going to go. I think the mandate basically says they have to be within that species ecological zone, which for some trees means half of this continent. I would like to see some kind of commitment that the trees that are cut down in Meaford get planted back in this area.
Sorry, Doug. Can we expand that a bit to not just the trees, but also the animals that
Habitat.
will be impacted as well, that they can't be mitigated in a salmon stream out in BC. It has to mitigate, it has to be done here in our community, because if I understand the rules, same as you do, Adam, when they mitigate something, which means that they've been given the right to destroy it or damage it, but they have to try to correct it best they can. It's not necessary to do it in the same province, or because they are federal, it's a federal base. They can do it anywhere in Canada. So, if it's going to happen here and if it's going to affect our environment, it's going to affect us, then the remediation should be here.
I know there's been a lot of concern for like aquatic life, because there's going to be, I don't even know the number, but the amount of liters of water that are going to be moved. Is that going to disrupt the natural currents in the lake? And how big of an impact will that be? Like, will that be affecting communities such as Thornbury or going over to Owen Sound or Collingwood that are all on Georgian Bay? And are they allowed to be involved in this conversation at all, because it's all one lake? And I don't know if we are fully aware of what the impacts are going to be. Obviously, TC's definitely put a lot of research into trying to limit the impacts on aquatic life, but considering it's never been done in recent years on this scale, I don't know if we can fully know, because the last time a plant like this was built was quite a while ago. So I wonder if they've considered discussing this with other townships that will be affected, and their businesses and their economy, and how much they rely on the water, especially Thornbury, because they rely so much on their tourism, and the lake is a big appeal. What happens when that lake is changed a bit, when it's altered? Do they get to have a say in that?
So probably I'll have this calculation, but I think I've given some thought to that very issue. If we calculated the volume of a 375 acre lake, I believe that number is correct, 60 feet deep, and when we figured out what percentage that was of the bay, we would know that this is a 1% impact or larger. I don't know, again, from an engineering point of view, if shoving the same amount of water that just came out of the bay back into the bay actually affects 3 times that area. I'd really like to understand what that means. And then from the species thing, I agree that it's a really good idea to try and start from the position that we repopulate the municipality with what was taken away from one small area over and put it into some other area where maybe we get more out of it. Maybe we populate a new park, or we, save some species that, but we make it more accessible to people, maybe put it on the hiking trails or something. But I think it's a really good idea. When I did my coffee chat, one of the things I was thinking about with fishing, because I'm a fisherman, is, whatever the calculation is for fish that might be, in harm's way, they should, I think, make a donation annually towards a fish hatchery, either start a new one or whatever, and take the number of fish at risk and, apply a multiple to that. Maybe it's double, maybe it's 10 times the number of fry, but it seems to me that, that could be mitigated locally as well. And I would like to see that in here.
An interesting idea. Shirley?
Mr. Chair, thank you. I think to Bob's earlier point, this is where we can learn from other communities in touring Bruce Power and understanding the amount of water that they pull out of the bay every day. And it doesn't seem to be an issue that we hear about from residents in those communities. So, and I know that they are pulling a lot more water out than TC Energy would. So I think we can gather some information in that regard. And I also understand that the fishing over there is fabulous, never been better. So if that's the case, you know, I think could have that conversation with folks at the Bruce. I know Harley and I at least could have access to those conversations and maybe be able to bring some information back to the group from BP.
Thank you. Dave?
Further to Shirley's comment, I've worked firsthand at the Bruce. We did maintenance on a rescue boat that they had in the outfall of Bruce Beach plant. In the middle of the winter, the engine room of that boat was 70 degrees from the water passing by it because it was in the outflow of the plant. So they're pumping a lot of hot water out of there 24 hours a day. And there's guys out there fishing all winter long. As far as the turbidity, you know, we talk about this project and I think they're trying their best to mitigate it, but many people look at the lake today, like our chocolate milk harbor, because of last night's rain.
And can I just go ahead? Can I make a comment? First of all, I think that the Bruce is not a good comparison. The pump storage project will not warm the water up like Bruce does. That's what attracts the fish. And it's the turbidity that, if anything, will affect the aquatic thing. When you're putting 40% of the flow of Niagara Falls on the Canadian side out into the lake in 8 hours, I'm not sure what you can do about it. I mean, they say they won't do anything, but I believe that it will look just like the harbor. That is a lot of water. All right. And it's coming out at a high flow rate. Over at the Bruce, the flow rate there is not extreme. It's high, but it's not extreme. This will be far more extreme, as so will the intake, right, at that point in time, because it's a tremendous amount of water, and turbidity is a big issue. And it's a big issue on the environmental side as well, especially for if we can get into, I'm not sure where drinking water comes in. And because all of us in my section where I have my property draw our water from the bay, and turbidity makes a big difference for us. It's a very high impact. So, you know, I just think that we should be really cautious in comparing the Bruce inflow and outflow compared to the pump storage. It's not apples and apples, right? It's different at that point in time.
More on the environmental concerns. I should have jumped in on Adam's motion, and it's a very good idea, Adam. I wondered if we should have said not replace every tree, but 10 times as many trees, because every time you plant a tree, it does not mature, it does not grow. So replacing trees one for one isn't, I don't think that's going to work. The other thing with the environment, we know this is a huge construction project. There's going to be huge equipment involved, and a lot of that huge equipment is going to burn diesel fuel. Carbon emissions, it'd be interesting to get some kind of an idea of how much we're going to, well, how much we're going to step back, how much negative there is for a few months or maybe a couple of years due to that, the concrete work. We also are going to have some noise pollution. I don't know how much, but I mean, we have noise pollution from the Army base. We've had that for the last 82 years, so I guess maybe that won't be different. But there will be some noise. Maybe in the future, some light pollution. I think those questions are going to be required to be answered, and especially I'm worried about the diesel aspect. I know how much a little 35 horsepower tractor kicks out, so.
Yeah, Bob, I should have mentioned at the beginning that there's environmental assessments that are going on that we will be privy to at some point when they're done. And I know the town is relying on some of those assessments. And so we'll need to understand them. And one of the resources that we will need is someone to interpret them. Because if anyone who's looked at an environmental study, it's not English. So we'll need a resource to help us with that as well.
One of the things we need to do and make sure it's done, and it will be part of that process, is establishing baselines and then establishing what's the acceptable variance from a baseline, and then what's the consequences. And, that's reassurance to the public as much as anything else. If there's a bad thing going on, we need to know how bad is it, and, what's happened, and what's at risk. Is drinking water at risk? Is it at risk for the municipality or individual cottagers in the impact zone? So the sooner that baselines get established and multiple monitoring points and all this other thing, I think everyone will feel a little better that there's no surprises, because we've started at the right point before there's any disturbance. And then we know what, the natural variance is through the seasons, and we get an idea of currents in the water. We start to understand, the air quality difference. We understand whether there's diesel emissions and we're having a worse quality air, and including shutdowns. If, on a particular hot, humid day, with the right sort of climate system in place, maybe they just can't do exterior work. They can do mining still, but they can't do stuff on the surface. So that type of process, I'm sure, is part of every environmental assessment. But I think that would be really helpful to the public to understand that process is, available for them to look at, to be reassured by.
Is it fair to say that the issue you were talking about with well water it's more of what may be released during excavation and digging on the site?
I think that's definitely, a concern. Whether it's, it may not be, unexploded ordnance. It could be just that you broke through the clay and you triggered more iron in the water. And, I've had some experience with really heavy iron in water or heavy sulfur in water. So, you need somebody that drills wells to tell you what to be worried about. But there's a reason why they stop drilling when they stop drilling. And it's a reason why I have an iron remover and a softener at my house. So understanding that, and it's not just for us to understand it, it's to reassure the public that this issue was identified and, was understood in such a way that we're going to do the right things, or this, the company and the project is going to be completed in such a way as to minimize the impacts. And we have a baseline to measure how far from that we've come.
Yep. Adam?
So Harley, actually, to your point, I had also met with Save Georgian Bay in the last week, spoke with them for quite some time. So that was a specific question that we looked into. There's going to be estimated, and this is TCE's estimates, about 500,000 tons of carbon put in over the 4-year construction project. Now, in saying that, TCE is also claiming that the project itself will scrub up to 470,000 tons of carbon out of the air per year. So they are estimating that within less than 2 years, it would offset the cost of the construction. Now, again, we can get those numbers specifically from them submitted to us. Looking into those numbers, that was based on not running natural gas plants that this will subsidize the power creation of. So again, whether those numbers are straight or whether they are based on some estimates, I would like to make sure that if they're already saying they're going to put 500,000 tons of carbon into the air over the 4 years, that they're actually going to be saving that out properly on the other end. Now, I did have another thing to add was the weight of this project. My family farm lives right down the road from it. They run off a ground well. They run off water that probably comes from up on the base and runs down through the limestone. What is 375 acres and 60 feet deep of water sitting on top of all of that layered stone going to do to ground wells and going to do to ground well water? You know, will that divert underground channels that, you know, you will not have the same streams that now my parents have to drill a new well. So.
And I agree with Bob. I think the baselines for not just people who draw from the lake, but people who have wells anywhere around the community has to be established. And I believe that we should get a commitment from TC Energy that they will pay for those baseline studies and do them in a continuing basis as long as the project's on and after the project's over. And also that the tests that they do are not just drinking water standards, but they also include all the heavy metals and nasties that, you know, for 80 years, when you try to kill people, you use whatever you got that might come off of that thing when they're doing the project.
Wonder, just kind of adding to your points there. After my grandfather died, my Nana and my dad, they contacted the base a couple times, kind of inquiring about the potential like ability to buy back the land if that was ever a possibility once they kind of found out about the proposal. And normally the response was always that there were like potential undetonated like ordnance that could be potential hazards, and that also that the soil or the surrounding area could be toxic from the weapons used there. So I wonder, have they really thought about how when they stir all this up, they dig this up and they make a giant lake, is that gonna be affecting the water itself? Is this water going to be extremely toxic and not nice because it's in contact with potentially hazardous soil? And is that going to affect, again, going back to the well water, is that going to be affecting well water? Or also, I will say this is potentially very old information. This could very well be solved by now, but I'm wondering if that's an issue at all still.
I think they're putting a liner in. So I don't think the water will interact directly with the soil, but I mean, from a environmentally positive, we seem to be talking a lot about possible contamination, things like this. If a company is willing to come in and scrape up the soil and actually remove this stuff, that's a possible benefit to our community, that we're no longer worrying about this section of the base that is going to be housed with contaminated soil or UXOs or things like that. So I think we still have to look at some of these as a positive towards our environmental situation as well.
Yeah, fair. Shirley?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think as we get into the environmental assessment process, assuming that TC gets that far, you know, a lot of these questions will certainly be answered, because to my way of thinking, if they're going through that process, it's going to be rigorous, both at the provincial and the federal level, and they won't be given approvals to dig up a hole if it's going to put contaminants into Georgian Bay. I just can't imagine that they would get approval to do that. So I think, you know, we all have the same concerns right now, as I'm sure TC does themselves, but I think as they get into this process, they will understand what mitigations have to happen, what measures have to be taken to prevent these types of worries from happening, because I just don't believe they'll get approval to kill the fish or to put contaminants into the bay.
Baselines. I think we should also talk about baselines with noise pollution during construction and when it's operating, because that's going to be huge for the local residents. I think we should establish too what it is currently and what the changes are, and if they could provide the decibels and give us an understanding, that would be helpful. And two, it'd be nice when they break down their costs, if they could even show what the cost of removing that contaminated soil is. Because even now, you've probably seen what's happening at the harbor. Like, there's a huge pile that hasn't been removed. It's huge money to remove contaminated soil. So I'm curious if they've looked and found a provider that's willing to take it away, and how many millions it will cost them if they've factored that into the construction.
I could, 20 after 6, just take a 5-minute break. Get some refreshments, then we'll get back at it for the last couple topics. All right. 5 minutes.
Just want to say you did a great job, Doug.
The new role.
Step right in.
All right, welcome back. So I think we've beaten up the economic discussion and the environment. Is there anything more that we want to talk through on either of those before we move on? No? Good. All right, so now we're going to talk about social cultural impacts, and it's looking at the potential social and cultural effects on the local community. Are there any comments or thoughts? We've touched on some of those already, but touch on them again. Adam.
I think, you know, when we look at other communities like Kincardine or Port Elgin or things like that that have benefited from Bruce Nuke's presence, they put money, they put dollars into community centers, into sports fields, into all of those sorts of things. I mean, our own Rotary clothing store here in town put out a flyer recently, and the bottom quarter of the page said Bruce Nuke on it. There can be serious social and cultural benefits to our area for a multi-billion-dollar company setting up shop. But I think we need to be careful of overshooting things, making sure that if they are going to be putting dollars into our community, that it's going to be supported, and we aren't going to be left as taxpayers with a bill for a new arena or something down the line that our tax base after 5-10 years won't be able to support. So I think if we as a community are going to be benefiting from certain social or cultural items, we need to make sure that this is a 50-year look at, and not just, oh, while they're here at maximum investment.
Absolutely. Yep. Ginny?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I absolutely agree. The community benefit side of things is a huge piece for us. And we do have a company hired to assist us with that process, which will be ongoing. But yes, along with whatever the big benefit is, we need to absolutely be certain that that is supported. But I think another big one under this category is healthcare. Again, if we're going to bring in however many hundreds of workers, and we're already struggling to attract doctors, and what is this impact going to be on our small hospital, and how can TC Energy assist our community, potentially with incentives for doctor recruitment and retention, office space, all of the things that are necessary to make sure that our healthcare is boosted, as they have done at Bruce Power to support that community. I will be expecting the same kind of support here.
Very good.
I wonder how much public involvement can be done in the decisions of where this money goes, because I'm aware currently a little bit of money has already been given. I think I noticed at the arena there was lots of TC Energy signs, so I'm guessing they funded the new scoring, and then we got new signs for the benches. I think they should probably allow more. Sorry, my phone is ringing. More public involvement with those decisions, because from talking to people that I go to school with, that my brother goes to school with, that was actually received very negatively, because a lot of people viewed that money as we didn't need a new scoreboard, we didn't need new signs for the benches, and now they have to look at a company that most people in this town currently don't like, from what I've at least talking to most people my age. So I think they should be very careful about putting it where people actually want the money, because now people look at that scoreboard and it says TC Energy under it and they just get mad at it, because it's like, we didn't need that. It was fine before, it worked. The signs behind the benches, they worked. We didn't need that. So if they could have more public involvement, that would definitely be beneficial to the public view. I'm not really aware of what most adults in this town think, and that's probably the more important opinion, but I know kids right now are definitely not super positive about the idea of this company moving in here.
Don't downplay it. Younger opinions are more valuable longer term. So good. Are there any other social impacts? Yeah, Adam?
I think for a company that is going to be spending an awful lot of time playing in our lake, I think it might be incumbent on us to ask them about what they can do to our beachfront. I mean, we used to have some of the best beachfront in the region. Decades of erosion and the waves that when the chocolate milk, as you stated, we've seen the last little bit. Is kind of, I remember I used to live right beside Memorial Park, and remembering what that beach was as a kid and what it currently is today is a vastly different thing. So again, for a company that seems to employ an awful lot of people that like to play in the lake, I think looking at them and looking at what they could possibly provide for us for a long-term, you know, environmental situation to maintain our beaches would be a good thing.
Yep, absolutely. You know, we talked about education earlier, that the school was, and I think that would fall into this category as well, making sure that if there are 1,700 employees and whatever the families are that move here, that we can not just house them, but also educate. Yep.
And Doug, I believe it was mentioned. I believe it was mentioned before, but I think also, you know, we should have a commitment to TC to, as far as the security goes, to make sure that there's funding to increase, you know, the police presence, right? Because policing is very expensive.
Chair, and I think public engagement falls under this category, and I know it's part of what this group will eventually participate in, but I think, you know, we need a plan, we need an understanding of how we're going to engage the public, as Lindy has suggested, in all of these discussions, because it will be part of our job to go back with council with recommendations from the community. That will be done in other ways as well through the IA process, but I believe there's a role for us to participate in that, and that we need to be conscious of adding that into our list of further discussion.
Yep, for sure. More comments on the social and culture, Lindy?
This is definitely a bit of a U-turn, but I thought this was probably the best category to mention it. I would just like to ask TC if they have a plan for what to do for the graves that exist on the property, because I know personally I have family members, older ones, like they're not grandparents, they're great grandparents and great great aunts, but they are buried there, and I feel like they should have a plan for, are they going to just try and avoid areas where they are? If they're unavoidable, like they can't leave them alone, are they going to be exhumed? Are they going to be moved? Are they going to be in communication with living family members? Kind of what is their plan for dealing with the fact that this is a piece of land that does have a history and it's kind of complicated, and they can't just ignore the fact that there are remnants left over from the people that live there, and the relatives of those people still exist today, and they do care about what happens to their bodies. And I just wonder if they put any thought into that.
Any more questions on that before we move on to the construction impacts? Yep, Bob?
So it kind of gets started in the economic thing, but you know, the idea of affordable housing, having sufficient housing, huge social and cultural issue. You know, do we see an opportunity? Can we turn this into an opportunity to improve our housing situation long term? And I also, you know, somebody brought up the idea of, you know, raising the prices on things, whatever that might be. Local inflation on food, you know, there can be pressure on you know, demand, so prices will go up on something or other. And so, you know, probably there needs to be some discussion with a variety of countywide you know, groups that manage and supply, you know, resources for, you know, people that are vulnerable. And you know, socially, we need to look after those people. It's pretty easy to race ahead if you're the one making a pile of money, but you got to look at the ones that don't have a choice. They're getting dragged along through this, and you know, they're going to run into certain challenges. Can't anticipate them all myself, but I imagine there's agencies that probably should be engaged to be part of the discussion. So.
All right, with that, we'll move on to construction impacts. This is discuss areas of interest around the construction on the local area. I think as we talk to TCE and get their plan of what the construction is, we'll have a much better view of construction challenges that may come. But maybe at this point, if you talk about some of the specific ones that we should dig into, it would be helpful.
I guess one of my big ones is the traffic. Nice to provide us the roads and if they're going to offer any widening of them before construction starts, because they're all roads that lead there quite narrow. And if there are towns considering putting any roundabouts in, traffic lights, because all the roads that they would have to turn on, none of them have a stoplight or a roundabout. And if it's heavy traffic, is the town thought about actually mitigating that?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And of course, there would be damage to those roads, and TC has already stated that they will repair any such damage, but we need to follow up and make sure that that happens. And I think there was an email that came to me a little while ago that raised a good point. If they're digging and if there's gravel or whatever, where does that gravel go, and who then gets the profit from that gravel or soil or anything usable that's dug out? So I just would like to know what the answer to that one is.
Yeah. Okay.
I think as far as traffic goes, the other thing we should be cognizant of is the hours of operation. Because if they, depending on their haulage, like, are we going to be subject to a 12-hour day, or is it going to be a 24-hour day where the truck traffic would be steady at this point?
Yeah.
And I think we've mentioned it a bunch of times. We don't think that all these workers are going to be living in this community directly. So are we looking at carpool lots? Are we looking at something like that is going to, transform an area that was either an open green field, something like that? So not only do we have to look at economic or, environmental damage to the base and the area up there, but will there be large parts of other bits of the community that will now be turned into a gravel parking lot or anything like that?
Yep. Good. Yes, Bob?
So I go back to the discussion about wastewater plant and this type of expansion. This is a trigger event. And because it's got provincial, federal jurisdiction on it, this may allow us to get grants we wouldn't otherwise qualify for: roads, bridge expansions, passing lanes, all those types of things. And then, from a construction point of view, I'm also looking at, would the hospital need any sort of expansion? Would the medical center need any sort of expansion? And, will we have more cooperative partners at the provincial and federal level? Because this fits in a special category as an enormous project. And so, there may be some opportunity there. And again, if these things have timelines of 2 years before they can get approved, the time to start is early, so that it's in place before it's needed.
Yep. Other issues with traffic, I worry about dust as they race down the 7th line, and I promise they won't be going slow. It's going to stir up dust in the area, so we'll need to do something to help mitigate that. And although the base regularly trumpets to us with their explosions, I wonder if they're going to be other excavation and underground detonations might feel different than what they're doing with artillery testing. Just don't know, so we need to understand that as well.
Detonating at the base. So if they're doing massive detonations underground too, like people in the impact zone, are they reassuring them that their houses structurally will be okay and the detonations aren't going to crack things and whatnot?
Going off of the traffic in and out of the base, how is this going to be affecting the base's operations itself? Because I know since it's a training base, there's lots of movement on and off every day with the people that work there. Like when my dad was employed by the base, it was every single day going in and out, dropping me off at daycare, picking me up, going to work. Is this going to be affected by the traffic? Because I mean, I'm not an expert on the construction of the base, but there's not a ton of entrances. Is it going to become more difficult for the people that work there to just operate on a daily basis? Because it's not really built for a ton of traffic, but I don't really know if this has been thought of.
I'd like to know what TCE's thresholds are for damage to the road and when they would mitigate it. I mean, are they just saying we're gonna run on it until it's turned into a gravel road and we'll fix it at the end of the project? Or what is their threshold for when a road becomes needed to be repaired, remediated, whatever you like to call it?
Naive on this, but we're talking that we think there's going to be a lot of aggregate and stuff flowing onto the base. I don't see that. Like, they're excavating a big hole that they got to get rid of. Hopefully they'll be able to dispose of the aggregate on the base. Like, I realize there's going to be a lot of construction vehicles going in and out, but I don't see the dump trucks and stuff like that coming off the base as much as, like, when all the work was done at the base the last time for the rehabilitation, you know, they set up a concrete plant, you know. I'm hopeful, and I may be naive in this, that, you know, we're not going to see dump trucks thundering back and forth heavily loaded.
Yeah.
You know, like, it would be nice to think that this excavated earth is disposed of on the base.
And I think that's
And certainly there are some holes up there that could that they could lose it.
yeah, I think it's a good question for TCE as
Yeah,
they lay out what the plan is,
Yeah.
is what's the traffic flow look like?
And
Because
here again, you know, we're working without the information we
Yeah.
need.
Jenny?
Yeah, just to jump on that, maybe they could explain to you that they're gonna have like you know, a gravel crushing zone, and they'll know when they've done these environmental testing, if they're drilling into limestone or whatever, and if they can use that as gravel and they can crush it. But yeah, if they could explain to that there'll be less trucks because they're able to repurpose it and crush it and use it, that would be very helpful. And if they're gonna line this pit too, or this pond, or whatever they're digging there.
Yeah, Shirley?
Mr. Chair, thank you. And I think we also have to remember that roads are not the only access into the project. There is the water. So, you know, are they considering using the bay to bring in any construction materials or so on? We just don't know at this point.
There was talk about bringing in barges, both bringing in equipment and perhaps removal of soil. Yeah, it's a great idea. I mean, I'm still not sure, and I need more information about this 370 acre reservoir. That is a huge area. The last time we had the international plowing match out here, the entire plowing match site and parking was about 350 acres. And anybody remembers that, and a few of us do. It was a pretty big area they had. So this is going to be a pretty big body of water. Yeah, I hope what is excavated to create the lake can be used up there. I guess it depends on the quality of material they get. Obviously, to make concrete, you need good sharp aggregate, and what better sharp aggregate than the escarpment? But until they get digging, I'm not sure just what they're going to get into. If it's good, if it's escarpment, or if it's clay, or just what it is. But As far as the roads are concerned, my personal preference would be that the municipality not ask TC to repair the roads to the state they were in when they started, but to do a complete rebuild of the roads. And not only County Road 112 and the 7th line, but there are 2 artery roads. I'm sure Adam's very familiar with 2122 Side Road and Duxbury. And they're going to experience increased traffic. And maybe TC be interested in taking that Duxbury Hill down and making it a decent area in the future. So I don't want to sound greedy, but the municipality, as far as I'm concerned, needs to go for the utmost on this when it comes to this. We may not get everything, but roads are so very important. I really do see at least temporary lights at both 112 and the 7th line. Maybe overreacted. At one time, traffic lights were put in and taken out after, but now seems like once they're installed, they're there to stay. And that may not be a bad thing. So, but there's, yeah, this construction, more traffic represents more possibilities of traffic accidents. And if you're experiencing more traffic accidents, you're going to have more policing. And our police budget is around $2 million a year now. And the OPP doesn't answer the call for nothing. So there's going to be some ramifications here from the construction.
Yes, Adam?
And I think we have to look at more than just, okay, we're going to repair the road, but my parents live on 112. Every time that the road has been rebuilt or anything, it gets higher. It keeps getting higher. Every time you try to get out of your driveway, your truck's now at a 10, 15 degree angle trying to get out on the road. It becomes a danger, especially in the winter. So if we're going to look at rebuilding roads, we're going to look at doing this sort of work. You have to also look at how it's going to impact the people whose driveways go up to it. That it's not at the same level. So do you lower the road? Do you build out everybody's driveway? Does everybody get a new culvert? That has to be considered as well.
Regulatory process. So here we just want to understand the regulatory framework and processes involved in approving and monitoring the project. I think as we sit around this table, we're all reliant on the environmental studies and having someone interpret them for us. But are there other things in the regulatory process that we want to understand rather than just wait for it? Is it that I don't actually understand all of the regulatory steps that they need to go through. I certainly don't need granular level, but just a wide, a broad understanding would be helpful for me at least. Are there other things in the regulatory area, Shirley?
Mr. Chair, thank you. And if I may, I think whenever, I'm not sure, Kirsten, if you've set a time for that yet, for when the people from the impact assessment at the federal level speak to us, that we'll get a better understanding of the regulatory framework and what our participation in that is. Because yeah, I'm very curious about this as well, and what our role is, both as a council and as a municipality and as this group. Just what it is exactly that we can have influence over in this regard. So I think we've got a lot to learn in this area.
Yeah.
I think, well, it's important that, yes, we are relying on other people to digest and feed the data back to us, that all the raw data be available as well, that it be public facing and not necessarily just you know, yes, this met the threshold. We should be able to see what the data, what the items collected, making sure that that is as public facing, because maybe we aren't going to be the ones who can see where those gray areas were maybe pushed in the one direction or another. But making sure that all that data is public facing, I think is important.
Very important. Yeah. Regulatory area.
I would be very much interested in seeing what the end game looks like as far as the biosphere is concerned. I guess it's not going to be a concrete tap what we are looking at of 375 acre size. So how would the biosphere look like in this location? And how far would a possible lake be drained every time power is being created? I don't think that it's going to be empty after 11 hours of use. So how far would the water level go up and down? You know, it would be very interesting to see that, have more information on that. And in my vision, I would like to see a really nice biotope there, which is relatively stable in the long run. And how much stability can we expect?
Another area that I'd be interested in is understanding what regulations there are about the decommissioning of a project like this. You know, it's massive in scale, it's huge, but what happens 50 years from now, or if it's 80 years from now with that site, and what is involved in that, just so we have an understanding of it. There's nothing more in the regulatory area, then we're going to go to miscellaneous, which if there's anything that you haven't raised that you'd like to now, please do. Dave.
Yeah, I wonder if it'd be possible to arrange a site tour of where like I spent a lot of time up there as a kid. And I think I know where it's going from you know, the shots you see and stuff like that. It'd be kind of nice to, if it, you know, and I know you're dealing with the military and you're dealing with TC, but you know, if you could have some stakes driven in the ground and an approximation of, you know, where this is going to be.
Yeah.
Like Lindy's concerned about the cemeteries and that. I've gone on the bus tours. I don't think we're anywhere near there, and I certainly hope not. But you know, if you can put a finger to it and see who's down there and what's where.
Mm-hmm. I think someone had earlier raised doing that, and we were a little concerned how we would do it, do a field trip publicly. That said, we should explore it and figure out if we can't find a way to put eyes on the site, like you say. And you know, part of that is getting a detailed map of the intended site from TCE, you know, a satellite image, what's the, where, yeah.
Answered a lot of my questions.
Did it? Okay. Yeah. Good. All right. Are there other issues that, Adam?
I'm just wondering what we as a group are planning on, or what we envision public engagement to be. That's one of our direct mandates. I think we have a bit of a missed opportunity this summer, that we have one of the biggest events of the town, the Meaford 150 events. There's going to be a lot of public events. I think it is incumbent on us to attempt to be present at one of those locations. Now, we don't want to run into any issues of an official meeting. So whether that's just 2 or 3 of us at the location, that members of the public can actually come and voice their concerns to us. I think we will be providing a disservice to the community if we wait until next summer before we allow them to come and ask us questions. And as you can see, the gallery isn't something that gets filled every month. So I think we need to do a little bit of work to go to them. And again, whether that's picking a town event, whether it's, you know, into the fall with the fall fair or the craft show, and having a booth, and whether we rotate out a couple people for just a couple hours at a time. But I think we should be looking at this now of what our plan is going to be moving forward.
Great point.
Sort of going off of that point with the public engagement, I know my role is kind of to be the youth representative. If there'd be any value in getting involved with the school, potentially me or someone else going and asking the kids questions, or maybe setting up like a box they can submit questions or anything, because I'd be willing to do that. Just talking to even younger kids, older kids, just to make sure that we get kind of every age range, because I'd be worried at public events, the kind of people that are going to come up and ask us questions are adults. They're going to be people that already know about it, but it might be good to kind of get kids aware, or even they can even help talk to their parents about it, who might have a little bit more power in voicing their concerns.
I think that's a great idea. Yep, Harley?
I'll try to do this in 1 minute. I know we can't, Mr. Chair. I'm going to throw out something that is very miscellaneous, but it has to do with reconciliation. We realize the efforts that TC is making in the field of reconciliation with the San, with the Ojibwe and the Chippewas. There is another reconciliation that needs to be made when it comes to this part of our community. And I won't go into a lot of details today, but that reconciliation has to do with the people who were expropriated from the property 82 years ago. What effect that had on our overall municipality, not just back then, but what effect it has had over the last 82 years. And the effect it has had on the descendants of those people. There's no doubt about it, the First Nations people who were on this property, they hunted, they fished, they grew, they had gardens, they grew beans and squash, all kinds of corn. They built shelters, they had communities up there. Starting in the 1850s, other peoples came there. They hunted, they fished, they had gardens, they grew, they made structures, they had communities. If there was ever a time, an opportunity for this municipality to get a little inkling of reconciliation for what we have lost by not having that 19,000 acres to manage, I think this is the time. And I would really, personal, but I would really appreciate TC going to bat for this community. I appreciate the chance that they will be financially beneficial to us, but to me, I think they're missing a mark here with their reconciliation. Yes, the First Nations, 100% approval, but there's more reconciliation here that needs to be done.
Okay. Yep, Lindy?
I think I can probably add to that point a little bit. I know my grandfather was 20, I think, when they took away the land, and I was pretty young when he died, but talking to family members, I do remember his experience talking about it. It was always very much a point that he expressed, was that movement kind of broke apart our family a little bit, because it forced everyone to move to different places, go different paths, and that definitely kind of left a very large impact. And I feel, despite obviously expropriation is much different than what would have happened to Indigenous people, and that can't be forgotten, it still had a large impact. I know when he was older and kind of the memory I do have, one of the only things that he remembered was the fact that he used to live on a military base, and he was so proud of that. But like, that used to be mine. So I think not forgetting that legacy is really important. And I think making sure that the people who did once live there are proud, or at least satisfied with what they do with the land, that it can have a benefit on this community, is really important.
Yep, Adam.
I have to be devil's advocate on the other side of the coin of this. My family had 350 acres up there. I don't care. There are people who don't. And I mean, saying that everybody, or that, you know, my ancestors, great, whatever you want to call them, yes, they were paid for the land. It was wartime. It was needed. It happened. It sucked. But me, as my current generation, I don't feel any direct need for compensation.
Okay. Is there anything else? We're past our time, but let's carry on. Yep.
Yeah, just a couple quick things. I find myself looking for go, no-go issues in this project, in this process. The people living in the impact zone, for me, that's a go, no-go. If those people aren't protected, if there isn't, say, a diversion channel or something, so that if there was any event, spring runoff combined with something else, I want to make sure those people are protected. And for me, I'm looking for go and no-go moments in this process. The idea that the water would be stirred up enough to actually have harmful effects on people's drinking water. The idea that wells would no longer be effective because we've affected the water table. I trust that the regulatory environment addresses those, but I'm looking for them as we go through this process. I also, my family had a farm that's under the de-icing station at Pearson Airport. You know, when my uncle, I visited my uncle down by Belleville last month, and he told me about, as a teenager, seeing houses on flatbeds, brick houses on flatbeds being relocated from the airport grounds. Not to be casual about, but boy, there's a tremendous price to progress. And, you know, there's a lot of different ways to feel about it. What I'm feeling in this project that's driving me a little bit crazy is when I see municipalities outside of Meaford passing their motions to be unwilling hosts, and they're almost, you know, preempting our discussion, and they're across the bay, or they're, you know, someplace where I can't imagine that the impact is what they're being asked to pass a motion on. So I'd like to get ahead of those discussions rather than keep reading the headlines about how they've all stacked up against this in some way. I'd like for us to have the facts quickly, get ahead of the whole thing, and be able to speak to facts, and, you know, to address the misinformation and the gaps in the information, so that, you know, there's not a one of us with a conscience that's going to, you know, suggest we go ahead with something that's bad. You know, we have to get the facts out in front to even have a sense of what's good or bad in this. So the go, no go moments for me are, you know, there's a number of them, and some of them are just part of the process. And I can live with, you know, how we negotiate a highway refurbishment or whatever. But, you know, the people in the impact zone, definitely we got to address, you know, resale values on houses, insurability, you know, the costs of insurance, and, you know, whatever the mitigation is on that. To me, that's kind of non-negotiable. It must be addressed. But as we're going through this, I'm looking for those. So that's just my approach to things. But I try to get to it and say, you know, let's stretch the timeframes till it breaks. What does that look like? You know, is there a way to do it on a slightly different design? So I saw the sprinkler hose model for dispersing water into the bay, and I went, well, that's an elegant solution to a problem. Is it, you know, where they finish? I don't know. We'll reveal that, and they're probably working like crazy on it. They probably have a team on that. We're just ordinary citizens here trying to figure it out. But I do think certain things would be non-negotiable, and, you know, we've identified a good number of them tonight. But I just feel like that's That to me is my approach is go, no go really means no go.
Mhm.
Or, let's put it back on the table and let's, hammer it out till we come up with the, proper mitigation.
Yeah, I think certainly the municipality of Meaford's got the most direct impact of the project is happening here. But any community that drinks water out of Georgian Bay, if they feel that there's risk that they're not willing to take, they're allowed to say that they don't want it. And I think that's what's happening in some of those communities. Meaford has said we're a willing host. And so that's how we're operating at this point as we go down the path with conditions, right? Yeah, sure.
That was all I wanted to clarify,
Yeah.
Mr. Chair. Absolutely
Yeah,
conditionally.
Absolutely.
And as, just speaking briefly for council, I mean, all of the issues that have been identified here are all part of the process of getting the information and the answers to everything that's been brought forward, because we certainly will never declare ourselves a willing host unless all of these things have been answered.
Right. Good. Thank you. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground today and we've gone over. I guess I wouldn't mind asking, some of these meetings are going to go over. Is this going to cause any hardship to folks if we end up extending some? Hopefully, we'll be able to have a sight line of, hey, we think this meeting might go long and we can advise folks. But does anyone have pressing issues on the second Thursday of each month after 7 o'clock? If we kept going an hour if need be? Yeah.
Yeah. And I would suggest that the next meeting, if we're going to have TC, may well go longer.
Yeah, that's why I was raising it. Yes. Yeah, Adam?
As well as longer, is there any use in putting this out to the public immediately, seeing what the response is and moving the meeting to the town hall?
I had no issue where we sit, but I don't have any real say in it.
To foster the best
Yeah.
public engagement, if we tell people there's an entire theater's worth, we might gather more people versus 20 seats.
Yeah, surely.
If I may, I'm not sure we're ready for that yet. I think we need to have that conversation with TC Energy to see if they were prepared to present to a Meaford Hall full of people. So I think we're just not quite there.
I'd like to hear it, to hold it, the meeting here, we kind of get a nice number. Kirsten, is there anything you can do to kind of enhance the promotion of this next meeting, like through our website or any other avenue?
Yeah, we can work on a communications plan to get it out to more people, not only social media, but other avenues to let the community know and try to get some more attendance here. I do want to touch on the Meaford Hall thing. We do have to consider that they have their own very busy schedule as well with bookings throughout the summertime especially. So there is that kind of factor into looking to move a meeting there as well. So we have to consider what they already have planned.
In this discussion, we've been presupposing that TCE is okay with our August meeting request. So we'll need to give some time to make sure that that's in fact the case, but I think that's the intent. Martin?
I agree with Charlie that I don't think we are quite ready to go public in such a big scale. So I would be careful with that. Let's get some more information for us first. And then when we are all on the same footing, then we should consider some more public consultation.
Okay, the next meeting is August the 8th. 2 weeks prior to that, there is a agenda planning meeting, and in that meeting, I attend as chair, and then there's one other member of the committee, sort of on a rotating basis. So I'm looking for a volunteer. Do you know the date of the next?
Wednesday, July 24th at 10:30 a.m.
So can I ask for a volunteer from the committee to join me in that agenda setting meeting? Bob? Awesome. All right, so Bob will do that, and I'll try to make this a practice, and I'll try to do my best to keep track, make sure everyone gets a chance to sit in on one of those agenda meetings. The next one, if TC is coming, might be pretty basic. All right. Is there anything else?
Just one
Bob?
question. I noticed that originally we were supposed to have a different moderator and now you're moderating. So is this going to continue or are we going to have a different moderator?
As it was described to me earlier, is Becky, who is the Ainley representative, was not available today and may not be available for the next couple of meetings. Is that maybe Kirsten, you could expand on that?
Yeah, so as Doug said, she was not available today, and that scope may change as the committee progresses, but the intention of the meetings is to follow the same format as the other municipal committees, which is if there are discussions, it is facilitated through the chair. So if there's contributions, it's through the chair to speak to the rest of the committee. And then, yeah, as if we have expert speakers or guest speakers like Save Georgian Bay or TCE come in, then that would be done again through the chair. Does that help answer the question?
Yes, kind of.
Yeah, I'm not too sure what the rest of the committee will look like beyond the next couple months that we're planning, as things may change, but yeah, I can't give a definite answer.
I was just curious though, because before we were going to have a monitor, now we don't. That's all. Just kind of what has changed. That's all.
Oh, I see. So yeah, Becky was not available today, but the moderator would just have been for this discussion. It wouldn't have been for consistent throughout every committee meeting.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
All right, if there's nothing else, then I will, I guess, do I ask for a motion to I adjourn this meeting? Thank you.